Welcome to the Books Brothers podcast, where each week we read, discuss, and challenge each other to become better men, and have a few laughs in the process. The Books Brothers are currently reading The Mask of Masculinity, How Men Can Embrace Vulnerability, Create Strong Relationships, and Live Their Fullest Lives by Lewis Howes. This week, the guys discuss the preface, introduction, and the first mask, the Stoic Mask. In our culture, showing emotion or fear isn't reserved for men. Yet, men deal with the same struggles and insecurities as anyone else. We'll discuss aspects of the chapters that stuck out to us, what arguments Howes makes that we agree or disagree with, and leave challenging each other. After the show, please share your comments and feedback on the chapters by emailing us at connect@booksbrotherspodcast.com. Do we want to start off with like a good thing that happened this week?
One good thing?
Yeah. Give the listeners
one gratitude?
A little bit of gratitude. That's a good idea.
Or so is that kind of a precursor to...
a little foreshadowing?
No, just something good that happened this week. Doesn't have to be gratitude.
Just tell you something good, huh?
I went to the last Royals game of the season for my father-in-law's birthday, and we took our girls, and they really enjoyed it, and it was great.
Nice.
This is so wholesome. I love that.
You take them to the little K?
Yeah, but they're not athletic enough or old enough to do the little baseball diamond. Plus, there's a huge line.
Dude, that's awesome, though. I wish... I think baseball's kind of coming back a little bit.
Yeah.
I feel like it was such a great pastime, and it kind of died out after a while, and I think it's coming back.
Yeah, steroids really made it come back, huh? In the 90s, 98.
Actually, if you watch Long Gone Summer, it's the steroids did bring the popularity of baseball back after the 94 strike. So
I was being serious.
You what?
I was being serious but joking at the same time.
Ooh, the classic double whammy.
All right, what was somebody grateful for?
I think as I've gone about like leaving my job, the only job I've done, just whenever you have conversation with folks that they're kind to you about like your next steps and encouraging. I think that's been something I've had a couple people just today. I'm sharing positive things, but I feel like I've had, some stuff where it's just like people are just like being discouraged that I'm leaving. So it's been nice, like having some people like really reaching out and like saying like, oh, you're going to be missed. And, thanks for your time here and such as that.
Well deserved, Stalin. I knew they would be like that.
Thank you to everyone who's joining us for our first official week going through our first book. Last week, we did our introduction episode introducing each of the guys in the Books Brothers podcast. I'm joined today with the entire group. We have Matt, Rob, Stalin, Thomas, and Fledz. Guys, it's good to be with you all as always. I've had this, obviously I've had this on my calendar because Thomas sends out the calendar invites. What I meant to say is I look forward to this more and more every single week. And especially with this being our first book that we've processed through in, about 7 or 8 weeks now. We did it in just preparation for the podcast. It's really exciting to be back. So looking forward to discussing the first 2 chapters. So let's dive right in. As a recap, we are reading The Mask of Masculinity, How Men Can Embrace Vulnerability, Create Strong Relationships, and Live Their Fullest Lives by Lewis Howes. This week, we read the preface, introduction, and chapter 1, which is The Stoic Mask. So I'll give a brief summary of each. This week's pretty easy since it's the preface, introduction, and then just one chapter. So the preface is just what a preface is. It gave the background of what inspired Lewis to write this book. He had just finished writing his first book and had a very successful podcast that kind of rose him to, I don't know if you want to call celebrity status, but just more well-known and making this entrepreneurial venture. And he's doing book signings. He's traveling around the country and feeling very lonely and unfulfilled, and realizing that he's portraying himself in certain masculine ways, but feeling empty on the inside. So that was what inspired him, more or less. And then we get to the introduction, which essentially gave a brief summary on how he came to identify these 9 masks that he discusses that men wear and portray. So he also listed typical depictions of what men or just people identify or believe makes someone a man, which we'll discuss in a little bit, some of the questions I ask. And then he summarizes briefly the 9 masks. So gives about a 1-paragraph summary of each of the 9 masks. And then the following 9 chapters go into each one specifically. Chapter 1 is the Stoic Mask. So being stoic, not showing fear, not showing emotions, being quote unquote strong. That is what being a man is. And if you're crying or showing emotion or showing any sort of fear, whether it's the battlefield or giving a presentation at work, whatever it is, that's a sign of weakness, and that is not manly. And he dives into some of the reasons why that we do that, and some of the fears that we have of, we don't want to be vulnerable to opening ourselves up to other people, because that leaves us in a position where others can judge and know our true selves. So even though we want to be fully known by others, we want to be accepted, we often are afraid that if we show our true colors, people won't like us and won't accept us. So we put on a stoic mask. So with that, is there anything else that any of the guys would like to add to that recap that I may have missed that stuck out to you all? Or shall we dive into one of the first questions?
I guess only thing I would say is just how much that Lewis hit on the negatives in his life that were caused by these masculine traits that we get conditioned with. So I guess that was kind of the nature of the read for me from his perspective, was that the Stoic Mask did a lot of harm in his life.
Yeah, just one thing to add real quick. I think that obviously he shared a lot of vulnerable things just about his past, but even just that experience in the playground with all of the kids and how he got picked last. And from that point forward, he really used that experience to propel him to where he wanted to dominate everybody, and he wanted to win at everything. And that, just that impact that it had on his life, where he had that experience, and he, made a belief about himself that he's going to go out and beat everybody. And then that turned into a vow of how he really lived his life, and how he wanted to just excel at everything and not really have vulnerability.
Yeah, that's great. In the preface, he wrote a line that I wrote down in my notes. He says that the most destructive phrase in our society, so those are strong words. The most destructive phrase in our society is, quote, "be a man," unquote. So wanted to just ask you all, since we're all men, all dudes, what scenarios did you personally hear that term growing up, or even now? And then kind of a 2-part question. How did that hearing "be a man," how did that shape your definition of what you thought or potentially still think it means to be a man?
Good question, Garrett. Just wanted to say, I think one of the most destructive phrases in my life is if I ever say "settle down" to my wife if she's upset.
Amen to that.
I don't think. Yeah. All right, go ahead. Serious comment.
No, I mean, I don't know about you all. I feel very privileged, because I think that I grew up in a home where I feel like my father modeled manhood well. And I think as a result, I do recall people saying "be a man" or "man up." And I feel like I recall it in situations honestly, the situation I remember the most is probably playing middle school football, hearing that being said and being used over and over again. And I remember it never being a motivating thing for me. And I feel like for me, it was maybe it was because I had that background that, my dad had modeled more of that's not necessarily manhood, is how tough you are. But I do recall that being a thing, and some people that being a very motivating concept. But for me, it wasn't.
It's funny that you mentioned football, because I think like something that I often think of some of my high school football experience with, like, I remember we were getting deep in the playoffs, so it's like getting colder and colder. And one of the coaches was like, all right, next week, forecast is going to be in the 30s. Offensive line, I think it was the offensive line coach. It's like, offensive line, we're not wearing any long sleeves. Like, just like arbitrarily, just was like, no long sleeves. Like, we're going to show how tough we are by bearing as much skin against the cold, as possible. And it was like those kind of attitudes and mantras where it's like, if you're tough, you don't wear sleeves when it's cold. And that's what, being a man is, because you're on the offensive line. You got to be tough. So just kind of things that I was like, man, kind of a head scratcher.
I couldn't remember any specific times when I heard someone specifically say to me, be a man. But I feel like I heard it most in sports when we were younger, like middle school basketball, playing with friends, just hearing coaches or other people just say, be a man when like someone gets hurt and maybe they're taking a little bit too long to get back up and start playing again. I feel like that phrase, be a man, that's a pretty bold statement to say it's the most destructive thing in our society. I feel like there might be other destructive things out there.
I think I've heard it, but rephrased in a more demeaning way, honestly, of instead of be a man, don't be a bitch. Right?
Yeah.
I heard that a lot.
Yeah. The negative.
I heard that a lot on the basketball court when I was playing, and just like sports in general.
I agree. I think, the negative side of it, I think, is used more often. Like, are you a boy or a man is kind of more what I think would affect me or would have affected me than be a man.
Yeah.
I think it's a comparison to something demeaning that's probably more commonly effective.
It's interesting that everyone has like experiences with sports. I mean, it makes sense. And like even here, like Lewis's story being a like total shame story, being him getting picked last. And like, when you're reading that, you're like, oh man, that sounds awful. And we've all had, I think he mentions like we've all had maybe one situation you look back to and you recall like really being shamed socially and how that affects us.
Yeah. So being a man, or the opposite of that, I think that, talking about like a lot of the things that we do want is actual true deep relationships. And he quoted someone specifically, like as it pertains to marriage, but it doesn't have to pertain to marriage. He just saying that it takes to build a like healthy, deep relationship with someone. It takes an incredible unlearning and taking apart what our culture has taught us about what it means to be a man, to realize how much we've been poisoned, to strip down to who we actually are. So like Thomas, there's an example saying, hey, calm down. Sounds like you've had to unlearn that's not a helpful phrase when trying to resolve an argument. But in more like longer term, deeper relational bonding ways, what are some things you've had to unlearn as you've matured as a man? And what, as a result of that, what benefits did that bring you to you and those around you?
So I was thinking on this question today. I don't know. I think with me, just like growing up and kind of like having a strong work ethic and my parents not necessarily providing like everything for me, right? Like really having to work for everything. I've become like so much of a doer, right? That like my day with its rigidity is focused on like accomplishing tasks and achieving and doing things. And I think that those are great masculine traits, right? To be a provider, to do things, to accomplish things, to, really take care of the roost. And so with that, just into singlehood for, 10 plus years, it really became what I needed to do for me, but also for my future. And so like kind of go. And now obviously that I'm married, coming home, like I still find myself getting into these routines of like doing and achieving and knocking things off the honey-do list that I'll literally not even embrace my wife as much as I should, right? Not slowing down and pausing. And so I think for me, I've had to unlearn like just being super productive and also just having connection and slowing down and taking that pause so that I can truly be available to my wife, because I think so much of my past has just been around getting things done, and now that for my future. And so now that the future is now, it's like, okay, now I need to do those things, but I also need to be a husband first. And that takes, responsibility with connection with your spouse.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good, Rob. I feel like I can really relate to that. One of my biggest things that I've had to learn to do better in my relationship with Ruth has been that, with that idea of the checklist, coming home and I ask how was your day? And I think sometimes we think that asking how was your day, oh, okay, I've done the good deed. I've checked in with my wife. And then there's times where that answer is maybe longer than I expected, maybe longer than I desired. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's something where, she'll start off in a story and then we're 5-7 minutes into it and I'm not paying attention and maybe I get distracted and, she'll call me out on that, which is good, as she should. But in my mind, I'm no. All I had to do was ask you how your day was. I didn't have to listen then too. So I think being able to be more engaged in that process of, I think for guys, it's really easy for us to compartmentalize things and to view things as tasks and not always take the time to sit in a moment, be in a moment and really enjoy the moment. And that's something that I feel like I'm always learning. As we go back to what Garrett, you initially asked, one thing that I had felt in my life and in my marriage is that I found that I've been someone who's had a lot of issues with lying. And I think I lied to paint the picture of me being this really either a really good guy or really a guy who cares a lot, compassionate, or I would lie a lot to maybe help paint the picture of who I wanted to be rather than who I always was per se. And so I've really had to go through the relearning of in a relationship with my wife or with friends, it's not about putting on the best picture that we can, but rather being vulnerable, being honest. And I think for me, that process really started probably 4 years ago of really working through that some with Ruth, realizing lying was a big issue in my life. And as I had addressed that problem, that issue, I think that it helped me to one, be a healthier person, healthier man, and then also helped me to have a healthier relationship with Ruth. And I think during that period, that's really when I feel like I started doing a better job with reconnecting with you all, sharing with you all some of my story of, my adult life. And as I went through hey, these are things that I've had issues with, failures with, it's funny because then, as you talk to your guys your age, friends your age, they're pretty much always going to have similar problems. And so you're oh, okay, I'm not the only one. And so learning that it's that openness and that connecting with friends on that level, you see that we're all going through the same things. And really the best is for us to be able to cope and help deal with those things together. Because obviously our spouses and family are really great in supporting us. But sometimes we just need men who are going through the same thing to help us go through life stuff.
Well said, Stalen. I would add to kind of what Rob was saying for myself about time management and how I choose to spend my time. And I feel like that's a really good way to evaluate yourself, because it really is the best indicator of what you value as a man and where your, traits that you feel are most important kind of show through is by your actions and how you spend your time. And you guys mentioned working out or whatever. And I feel like I spent early in my career, especially, I was doing long distance a couple of years, so this wasn't a problem. But once I started living with my significant other, I realized I spent a odd amount of time working out compared to what my priorities were at that time. I would spend 2 hours in the gym every day when my priorities were my relationship with my fiance and my career. And those things didn't match up for months, and it bothered me, but I didn't really know why, And it was because I had tied a lot of my identity to that as a man. And, you know, I thought that without that, there was going to be something missing. So I think as we grow, whether it's masculine, things that are tied to masculinity or things that are just tied to like different phases or seasons in our life, we've got to reevaluate how we're using our time and whether that's the best fit for the people around us or ourselves.
That's good. That's good, Thomas.
Man, I can relate to a lot of what all three of you guys have said already. And I'll just echo pretty much everything. But other things that have been going through my mind about things that I've had to unlearn to become a better man. The first one that came to mind is I'm the sixth kid. I have 5 older siblings, and that obviously had an effect on how I was raised, because in one aspect, I kind of had everything there for me. People would do things for me. I never really had to take responsibility or take charge or take action on anything, because I always had an older brother or sister to do it for me. And so I would just go with the flow with whatever it was. And I kind of had that mentality, that mindset all throughout high school, even a little bit of college too. But getting into college, being on my own, and having positions of leadership and responsibility forced me to unlearn that mentality and that mindset and take responsibility, take action, take leadership roles in the things that I was involved with. And that's a huge change, but a good change, because I feel like I am a better man because of that. Being put into leadership roles and being the one responsible and having to do all the little tasks to get things put together. And I think that's led me to the man I've become today, which has helped me probably become a better husband, a better father, a better brother, a friend, all those things. But then Rob and Salen, you were talking about having that checklist of things to do. You're doing those things rather than, connecting with your wife or something. I can relate to that as well. But at the same time, once we add kids into the mix, I think those things are kind of like a necessary evil, because we're both forced to do these little mundane tasks like clean the dishes or wash bottles or clean the table, sweep the floor. Those are things that we have to do. Maybe we don't have to, but they're more of a priority with kids around. It's kind of like compromising. I know Emily and I, we both felt very annoyed and frustrated whenever we had to clean up every single night after a long day of work, put the kids to bed, wash bottles, do dishes, so that the kids would have milk and bottles and dishes for the next day. So, Garrett, I don't know if you can relate to that as well, but we had to kind of compromise our relationship to do these little mundane things as well. And it's gotten better over time. As the kids grow older, you don't need to do that as much. So we get to spend more time together in the evenings.
I think, Matt, since you mentioned me, I think to tie in what to Thomas says, it comes down to priorities. Because cleaning the house to where you're not perpetually walking on old food that your kids have thrown on the ground. You have to clean up the house, right? But at some point you're gonna have to cut some things out. So if I'm, I get my weekly, this is how often you were on your phone, your average hours per day, or, you look at your Netflix account or whatever it is. It's I've somehow made time for this or that. So I totally hear you. And then what Thomas is saying to kind of tie it in, it's you make time for what you prioritize. And it's very difficult when you're exhausted and tired after a day of work, kids, cleaning. It's hard to, ask your wife, how are you? How was your day? And then actively listen and engage, like what Stalin was saying. So I can definitely. So maybe the unlearning is some of the potential, not necessarily lazy, because watching stuff and those are good things, unwinding things, but in turn, unlearning bad priorities, or unlearning the statement, I don't have time. It's like you have time, you just didn't make time because you prioritize other things.
Let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsors.
Unmarried men, are you tired of living like a slob and need some motherly care to do your laundry or bake you a cake after a recent breakup? Look no further. Now introducing Rent-A-Mom. Rent-A-Mom is perfect for those mama's boys that live far from their mothers, but need some womanly care in their lives. Rent-A-Mom is perfect for all situations: meal prepping, hosting parties, or even filling in as a mom when introducing your new love interest to those in your life. Why fake it when you can rent it? Rent-A-Mom.
Robbie!
And now back to the show.
What were you going to say, Thomas?
I was just going to mention, I know that this question was about what from your traditional masculine conditioning have you had to unlearn. I actually heard more answers about what we had to learn correctly than I heard what we had to unlearn. And that makes me think that the traditional masculine upbringing teaches you things in a way that's not actually effective, so that when you grow up, you realize, oh, this thing that I'm doing, like leadership, that I thought was masculine, I've been doing it in totally the wrong way. So now I have to unlearn that way so I can relearn the correct way. Or, you know, anything you can think of. I just feel like maybe that's more accurate compared to like having to completely unlearn something. It's more like unlearning, or it's more like learning the right way to do it.
That's a great segue into the next question, Garrett.
Rob's ready to move on. Are you talking about question 3?
I want to hear Flez here, baby. I know Flez is going to have something to say coming up here. Yeah. Because a lot of those things are Flez.
Okay. All right.
In a good way.
We'll move on to the third question. And just for the listeners, I did not explain this at the beginning. We kind of are taking a rotational approach where someone from the group runs point on facilitating the question asking and kind of emceeing an episode. So everyone reads the required reading, but for tonight, I decided to take point, and I wrote all the questions down. So I sent them out to the guys beforehand. So yes, next question in the introduction chapter, Lewis Howes, the author, he shares a list of typical depictions of a quote real man. So I won't read them all. That's what the point of this book club is. You have to read them yourself. But the question is, which one do you most identify with? And is there anything that you would add to this list? Flez, do you have, since Rob mentioned you, did you have anything that came to mind in response to this question?
Are you calling me out because I'm physically fit?
You are the Olympic bodybuilder powerlifter of the group, so yeah.
There's no Olympic powerlifting. I used to be a competitive powerlifter. There's
Olympic weightlifting. Olympic was used in
Olympic was.
I just let it go because I was trying to be nice, but I can't let it go again.
What do you mean you were trying to be nice?
It's not. Someone's fact checking on us.
I can't.
All of our subscribers are going to fact check. Is Adam Flesner an Olympic powerlifter?
That just sounds like that. Like that sounds like I'm way cooler than I really am. So I just want to, be a little.
I think you're pretty cool, Fles. All right,
this is so humble.
So no, I am not calling you out because you are strong and physically fit.
I can relate to this. I mean, I've been feeling a lot of this, like, why am I so obsessed about learning about masculinity lately? And it's because my stepdad's passed, he has Alzheimer's and not doing well. And it's kind of bringing up these like feelings inside of me of like, I got to step up, I got to be a man. Mm-hmm. And I really have had those kinds of thoughts and like almost like rage, like, I gotta do this, like I have to be a better man now. Cause like my father figure is about to go away, it's a real tough reality. And it's like, it's been bringing up a lot of tough stuff to deal with. Like, man, like I'm not going to have that sense of security there anymore, And so then it really makes you kind of go in, and think about your past a little bit and you know, it really, it's like, man, you don't really realize what these people have done for you until they're about to go away, you know?
Oh, wow.
And just having him, seeing him, his drive, and just grinding and work and providing for his family, you know? And he's brilliant. So I just am blessed to have had that as a good quality of a man to look up to. But there are some negative traits of like being way too into work, you know? Mm-hmm. So I'm like stepping back and I'm like, okay, like I'm letting this affect me, but I'm not going to let it change who I am and become this like workaholic type guy now, just because like like I learned good traits from him, some good traits from my real dad. And then, but the successful at everything he does thing, you know, I can see that. And like, you know, Larry is very successful at everything that guy does. And so when I think of a real man, yeah, I do. I think of like somebody that is like him, like just very driven and like just works, provides for his family. But at some point there's got to be like a balance there, you know? And so these are just things that I've been wrestling with a lot personally lately. And, you know, the physically fit and strong ones I have been working on a lot for the last few years, you know, coming out of powerlifting. I from powerlifting, I got this like almost like false sense of strength of like, I can do this and most people cannot. Like most people can't lift what I'm doing. Like they can't do this. But in our reality, internally, I was like in turmoil. And so like outwardly, I was projecting this like very strong physically guy, but inside I was just a wreck, you know? And that eventually got exposed with my suicide attempt, obviously, that we all talk about. And I have to bring that up because it's the end of September, which is Suicide Awareness Month, and which I think is really neat that we're doing this. This is our first content episode, and it just so happens to be the last week of Suicide Awareness Month. And so I obviously feel compelled to bring that up. And
we love you, dog.
Yeah. So just glad to be here. And
we're glad you're here too.
Man.
Yeah. And I think a lot of what we have going on right now has been extremely helpful for me personally in my growth as a person from that point on of when I was hit that really bad low. And I think if you look at my life back then and compare it to now, it's not just this, but I've had to do a lot of work. But this has been huge for the community aspect of my life and having lost a certain part of my life before and kind of had to restart. This has been like an invaluable thing in my life. And it's just, and it makes sense. Like all the data, you know, as a science guy, all the data shows happiness comes from the community. It's like the number one thing.
Yeah.
It's good.
Dude, I just want to commend you because all of the work that you've been doing, like you didn't go back into the gym and try and set new goals, right? Because you knew that wasn't going to make you happy. You rolled up your sleeves and you looked yourself in the mirror and you said, hey, I got to make some changes. I got to do what is going to propel me forward and actually be a man, right? So looking yourself in the mirror, going through therapy and like trying to dig deep, right? And really learn and all of those things I think this chapter really hits on in terms of like taking the mask away, being vulnerable with ourselves, truly looking ourselves in the mirror and seeing like, where have we come from? What are we doing? How do we go forward? Right? Like our past, present, and our future. And I want to commend you for all of that work, man. It's good and honest work.
You really let a lot of things go too. Like all these little things that are trivial to a lot of people, like drinking, for example. Like that's just stuff that Fuzz took seriously and let go for a while, or for good, whatever you think is best. But like that's something that most people will never, like, I think, get to the point to where they're willing to do those sort of things that are judged pretty harshly by everybody else, you know? Like, it seems like a small thing to talk about, but actually doing it, I know, is pretty hard. So yeah, dude, way to go.
Unfortunately, I hit a rock. Now you could call it a rock bottom. And so for me, when I first started therapy, I told the guy, Kent, he's amazing. I still see him. We have a really good relationship. But I told him, I never want to experience what I just went through again, ever. He's like, okay. And it's like, yeah, it's never going to happen again. But yeah, I mean, like, I have had to, like, totally change my identity of, like, I'm not a power lifter. Like, that's not my life. Like, I'm like, first, like, it's like, I'm a human, I'm an animal, I'm a brother, I'm an uncle, I'm a godfather. You know, there's all these things that come way before anything related to, like, fitness, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, when you realize, like, wow, yeah, that's like, it's important to be healthy, but that's not what I was. So it's like putting an identity in something that's just like, it really took me getting, yeah, it took me getting back to, it took me back to getting to, you know, realizing that, you know, your faith is the most important for me, putting that number one. And then from there, just kind of like, you know, because I'll still hit lows, but nothing like that. But like, you know, everybody has like bad days, but like, you know, that's always like a good rock to go to is, you know, foundation of, you know, faith. But yeah, I mean, I had to, like, I'm never going to compete in powerlifting again. I like running. I used to be a really good, not a really good soccer player. That's funny. 13 seconds, Rockwood Summit. 13 seconds. One goal. School record. First part of the game.
Fastest goal.
But I ran like a 5:30 mile at one point. It's like, I like running. I like hiking. I like traveling. Like, it's like, we got to a point where I was like, I can't go on a walk because it might impede my recovery for my next lifting session. It's like, it's pathetic. Yeah. It's like, it's just, you know, people get so sucked into it, you know?
I remember when, Flez, when you came out one time to Arizona, we were going on a hike and you wanted to finish the hike early because you, like, didn't want to, like, get too tired for the lifting session you had that afternoon.
I know, it's so bad. It's like, dude, I'm in Arizona for the first time ever and I'm worried about that. It's like, come on, people.
You were committed, man.
I know,
which is good. Yeah, it's a good thing. Not all bad.
Yeah.
Adam, with what you were sharing, I couldn't find the exact spot in it, but it was talking about that the guy who was in the military, and
they'll die.
He talks about, like, the key to going in, like, fearless, and like he ends up saying basically that, like, let them never know that you're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was saying that in reference to, like, his own, like, squad. And I think that with what you're just sharing about really shows that it's like that mentality might work in certain situations, but, like, in the long run of, like, not letting individuals know, like, where you're, like, not letting community know, like, where you're at. As you can see, obviously, from, like, your story you shared there, that we have to open up. We have to talk through things that we're dealing with. And really, if we're just going through, but yeah, I think it's that reminder that through vulnerability and, like, through openness that takes, like, real strength. And so we talk about, like, the ideas of what we think a man should be. And, like, one of the terms that was in there at the beginning is strong. And, like, okay, if we're just talking about, like, physical strength, like, yeah, okay, maybe that's there's some artificialness in that, but, like, to be, like, strong, like Adam, how you're talking about, to, you know, be able to face, like, the hard things in life and have hard conversations with the friends, or talking about the strength of, you know, a father who's going to work hard to provide for his family. Like, that's strength, like, you know, that willpower to get through things.
Yeah. I just wanted to do a real quick take on kind of an opposite take on skilled at fixing things. So that's like a definition of what a real man is there. But, like, that is one thing that makes me feel less of a man. So, like, I'll put it in context. Like, our buddy, Anthony Savello, I call him for everything. Dude, I need my spark plugs. I got a flat tire, my oil change. Can you help me move? I need you to help me move something in the car, right? So like anything that involves like heavy lifting, fixing things, anything home related, I go to him. And like, I think, yes, like because I can't do all of those things, that doesn't make me not a man. It does not make me not a real man. I clearly am not a handyman in that example because I don't know as many things as he does. But it doesn't, like, what we're good at or what we're not good at doesn't define, like, there's not a scale that says, okay, you can bench 225 10 times 4 sets, man. If you can't, you're not, right? If you can change a flat tire, you should know how to change a flat tire as a man.
You're bringing up some vulnerable things in Plez's past.
Right.
I remember 225. Yeah. It was glorious.
I think I struggle with some of that stuff because, I don't know, I feel as a man, we should be able to do those things as well.
Oh, man. Such a good point, Rob. Such a good point.
Yeah. For sure. And I think I should just call out, like, I think we're all on the same page when we say this, and for all our hundreds of thousands of future listeners out there who are going to go back in time and listen to this, is so like
to cut out.
None of us are advocating that the things that are listed here are in and of themselves bad things. It's like what Flez said. It's like, it's not bad to be fit. It's when it's taken to an unhealthy level. It's not bad to exercise, like Thomas said it, but it's like, hey, I'm not speaking to my wife or my significant other, the person I live with, things like that. And so completely agree, Rob, like being handy, those are good things. I seek to be more handy. I like being able to know things. I draw identity from that. Perhaps it can be too much though, but all that to say is I can definitely agree with that. Like the example I thought of unlearning real quick, and then we'll move on, is like, your like career trajectory and always having a path and moving up a ladder and starting in the nonprofit world. And then like a couple years later going into the business world, it was like, I've shared with you all before, but I had this like false belief, like, oh man, I'm like literally 2 years behind all of you guys. And because y'all have already started your jobs, and a year or two later after that, you started getting promoted, and I'm still like just starting out. And it's like, man, that's how I'm going to define myself. And I just remember growing up, similar to Stalin, I felt like I was fortunate in that I was modeled some very healthy things by my father. And I never cared about what his job title was. I never cared about how much money he made. I always enjoyed that he was at every game growing up, that he was at every dinner, and that he was like present with me. And that's what I just try to remember now, that in whatever job that I'm in, I do ask about travel, and I ask about, I try to assess, how is this job or is this position going to affect how involved I can be with my family? And so it's not necessarily like unlearning something, but it's like rejecting a belief that can be really toxic and poisoning, that can, potentially steer me away, like chasing a career title or salary at the expense of my family, something like that.
Let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsors. Road trips across the country are adventurous and fun. See landmarks, eat at new diners and restaurants, meet new people along the way. But they can be long, and maybe you need to stay hydrated. Maybe you need to satisfy your taste buds. Maybe you need to break the ice with a conversation starter. And maybe you need to break down social or racial barriers. That's why we created Big Gulps. 569 ounces of your favorite drink in one cup. Just raise your Big Gulps to anyone you meet along the way and start that conversation. If you see others with the Big Gulps, raise your glass and salute and say, "Big Gulps, huh? All right." Avoid awkward silences in the conversation by raising your cup again and say, "Well, see you later," and walk away. Big Gulps. Stay hydrated and stay social. Grab one at your local convenience store now.
Love it.
Love it. That's so good.
And now back to the show.
Continuing with chapter 1 in addressing the Stoic Mask. The author addresses how showing fear or emotions is a sign of weakness as a man. Specifically on page 27, he says, if we shared how we really felt, quote, it means making yourself vulnerable to the judgment of other people. It's much easier to eliminate that risk by retreating behind the mask and showing people only what you think they want to see, unquote. So yeah, that resonated with me with everything you all have been saying, right? Like, I'm powerlifting. Look how, buff I am. My muscles are bulging out of my shirt. And yet it's, I feel beyond empty inside. So my question, why do you think men are afraid of letting people in and opening themselves up to this vulnerable position?
A few years ago, I feel like I had been going through some failures in marriage and such, some things that really were hurtful to Ruth. And I remember when I was like sharing this with some guy friends and trying to get like advice and seek input and that kind of thing. I remember like one of the first guys I like reached out to like talk about some of the things that I was like needing work on and some of the things that like I was failing essentially at in marriage and my relationship. The first guy that I like reached out to about this, I remember like asking him and kind of like sharing my heart and all these things. And his response was like, oh man, you just got to not do that. Just stop doing that. And I remember just being like so discouraged. And like, it was one of these things where I think the lack of like care, compassion, and it felt like a situation where like I was bearing a lot. And then this individual basically gave me like nothing back, no openness on his side. And I think sometimes having had that experience of like when you try to share with someone about like something deep and then they don't reciprocate, I think it's that feeling of hurt because you feel like maybe our relationship wasn't what I thought, or maybe I am this giant failure. And so I think that what's tough about being vulnerable is not everyone's going to be vulnerable with you.
And also, there's a lot of people that will just judge you and you can do nothing about that. And they'll change the way they treat you and they'll change the way that things go between you two, just because you maybe were too vulnerable. And there's just always going to be people that are living with kind of more rigid ideas of masculinity that aren't helpful to them or society at large. But at the end of the day, we get a lot further kind of inwardly becoming better people than we do posturing for others.
This one kind of hit me hard this week. Several reasons. One, I think this is what I struggle with the most, is just being vulnerable with people. And I've been trying to work on it for years and years, and I still have a long ways to go. I think there's several factors for me personally. One, growing up in this Midwestern society, I feel like that's what our culture is people pleasing. We're all people pleasers. We want to make sure that everyone around us is okay with the way that we live and the things we say. We're so afraid of offending someone from whatever we believe or whatever we say. I feel like that's just how society lives. Also, kind of going back to me being the sixth kid, I don't know. I've thought about this a lot over the last couple of years, but I think a big reason why I kind of grew up like this is because having a big family with 5 older siblings that, we were all pretty close. I was really close to my brother, who was closest in age to me, but seeing them all one by one just go off to college, go off and live their own life, made it tough for me to really open up to other people, because seeing them leave, I was just afraid that, if I got close to other people, they're just going to leave me too. And then what's the point of being vulnerable with those people if they're just going to leave? Same happened with a couple of youth pastors, like people that I really looked up to, that I was close with, that I trusted, respected. They went off and, just lived their own lives. And, we never really stayed that connected afterwards. So I think experiencing that over and over again growing up made it difficult for me to open up to anyone, because what's the point? If they're just going to leave again after a couple of years, then I have to start all over again with someone else. And yeah, there might be some really good moments and times in that, but
I agree with you, Matt.
Yeah, I think it's different now, like this stage of life where, we've kind of chosen who our friends are at this point. We have a lot less interaction with other people, a lot less opportunity to make friends at this stage of life. Yeah, we're married. I'm married. I have kids. Fingers crossed that we stay together for a very, very long time. So I think that's different in that way, but I'm still learning how to be vulnerable. And it's one of the things that I struggle with so much. But when I really think about it, like, yes, I should be vulnerable because I want these people to know me. I want these people to love me for who I am. So why am I afraid to not, share my feelings, what I'm thinking, even if I'm doing something stupid? Like, I need to just learn to ask for forgiveness and, hope that whoever it is, my wife, my kids, they'll still love me for who I am. But it's really hard to do. Like, I don't want to look like a bad person, a bad father, a bad husband, but and I think he hit on it a little bit in this chapter too. Like, the people who express those emotions and are vulnerable with people who love them, like, those are the strongest people that he's come across. And I want to be like that.
He said that being vulnerable gave him like superpowers.
Yeah.
It made everything in his life better. His career, his relationships, everything.
Combining what you both said in that, like, those are some of the strongest people. And Thomas, when we have experiences where we open up and people don't accept us, even though it like hurts, it can sting. It's kind of a way to kind of like sift the sand, separate the wheat and the chaff, or whatever the phrase is, of like, oh, well, maybe this person isn't worth being a friend. Not that we shouldn't like love our neighbor, but just in the sense of like, oh, like if I can't, I'm reading this book that Stalin recommended. And one of the lines that stuck with me is, we cannot accept acceptance until we are fully known. And so if we're trying to be fully known and people don't accept us, then it sounds really harsh, but it's like, we should probably not be prioritize a lot of time with that person. Like, if it's a one-sided relationship, and then the people that do accept us, that do want to go deep, go through those rock bottom moments, like what Flez was talking about, like what Matt was talking about, like, those are the people we want to spend our time with, our family, those lifelong friends that proverb talks about, that are closer than a brother.
I feel like I need to say something about being vulnerable as a man, being the only like single guy here as far as dating. And
do it, man.
It's tough because I have a very unique experience as a divorced man, Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to be vulnerable to a girl that you just met, or that you're dating. Because it's like, man, like, if I'm vulnerable to this person, then she could leave. There's this fear of that,
Do you find a lot of women actually don't really like that?
Me being vulnerable?
Just in general, vulnerability coming from a man is something that's so foreign to them that they're just kind of like, I don't know what to do with this.
I would say that's what they yearn for.
Honestly, I think it's the opposite. I think it's like what I've experienced. They feel safer with you. That's what I've been told that a couple times by a couple. Yeah.
Wait, you're agreeing. Girl.
I don't know how to say that without it sounding bad.
No, you're saying though, you agree with Thomas and Rob though, that it's like, it's a positive thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's like,
because you said the opposite and I was like, oh, and then you like confirmed what they said. So I was confused.
Oh, no. Oh, sorry. I must have misunderstood what Thomas said. No, I've experienced, being more vulnerable and open is different from what all these other goofballs out on the world are doing. And the women have told me that they feel safe, like they feel safer, there's like this space, they feel safer when a guy is vulnerable.
Like a safe space?
Mm-hmm. Safe space. until I go off on my rails, and then it's like, screwed that one up.
All right, ladies.
All right,
you're looking for a safe space. We got Adam Flesner over here.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the feelings of like being closed off, and like if I share too much, then they will think I'm weak, and then there's this potential for the relationship ending. So I have felt that internally, and that's something that I have to work on consciously a lot. And I feel like I'm probably not the only one that feels that way.
Yeah.
Which is just weird. It's like, why do we have that? Everybody does for different reasons, but yeah.
That's good. And, I think that segues us to like the next question, and which will be our last for this episode. You've talked about like, because I think this or I think that, and Matt, you said the same thing. Like, it's hard for me to do this because, what if this happens, or I think this might happen. And ultimately, another word for that in this instance of think is our beliefs. And on page 36, he doesn't like fully explain it, which is why I think it's a great question to ask to wrap up our time. He says, quote, "We are driven by our beliefs. The problem is that many of our beliefs aren't beliefs at all. They're faulty assumptions built on fear that get baked into culture because we're even more afraid of addressing them than we are of addressing the fear that created them." End quote. So what do you think are examples of faulty assumptions that are built on our fears that we are even more afraid of addressing? Not that you have to answer, Flez or Matt, but I'm thinking like it goes for all of us, not just your specific examples that you've shared. We are afraid of being vulnerable, showing some of our true colors because we think X, Y, or Z. So it's like, well, why do we think that? Why do we believe that? And it's kind of the paradox that when we do open up, most of the time, Stalen, he's had a bad experience. We've all had bad experiences. Again, I don't know how close you are to that person, Stalen, but I would imagine you probably don't go as deep with him and probably have some boundaries there in your relationship with him. People that are worthwhile sharing these things, there's that reciprocity and that paradox that, oh man, if I do open up, I'm actually like accepted, and this person's showing me grace and is going to love me through all of my junk and messiness and help me on my path to restoring my marriage or moving to healthier levels of mental health or whatever that is. So what do you think are some examples either in your own life or that you've observed of faulty assumptions that are built on our fears?
I'm afraid to sound like a complainer, and I'm afraid to sound like I want people's sympathy, because if I say anything that makes it seem like I need any sort of emotional backing, I'm weak. That's something that actually, even before this podcast, I was nervous about, because I was like, if I share any feelings on a podcast, it'll just sound like I'm complaining and I'm weak, and nobody likes a complainer and nobody wants to listen to some guy have a pity party, is kind of how I feel, but to an extreme, right? It's about everything in my life. It's like, unless it's somebody I really, really trust, I'm not going to go out and say, hey, I kind of feel like this. It's not very good, I don't think. Maybe I should talk about it, right?
I think with like my career or like work, I've at times felt like I'm not good enough or I'm not qualified enough for that. That's one that I can relate to.
It's a good one. You know what? I also had a little bit of a red flag reading this chapter in my mind was how much of masculinity as we know it in the United States in 2023 and, ever since we were born, like all the stuff that conditioned us, like, how much of that is actually what causes our beliefs and the way we act versus actual nature? Because men are wired a certain way, and I'm sure we're wired that way because in the past it helped us in some way. So I was asking myself that, because I don't want to just look at masculinity and say, let's throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's all bad. It's all just learned stuff that we, don't benefit from. Because obviously somewhere down the line, this evolved the way it did because parts of the bits and pieces of this masculinity thing were beneficial to us and to society, to our families. You know, like it's been shown that men are almost always more aggressive than women, but a lot of times you need a man to be aggressive to provide and protect. And those are great qualities. So, you know, I mean, I guess I wondered, do you guys think it's 50-50? Do you guys think it's, you know, like 30% of it's nature, 70% of it's culture? Do you think it's more than that? Like, I just kind of wonder.
I mean, I think with like all of these like masks that we'll go through, there's a healthy place in them. I think that there's some health in stoicism. I think that it's finding, balance, and it's finding, I mean, you know, the idea of a mask being it's something that you're covering yourself with. And so if you're using it as a defense mechanism, or maybe if you're using it away as coping, then that's the issue. But I mean, a lot of the masks that we're going to look at are not all bad things. I think it's things that when we take them to the nth degree, that they can then cause a lot of personal issues and relational issues, and just a lot of conflict in life whenever we make that the end all.
Yeah, Thomas, I have two thoughts. The first kind of ties into something Flez shared about earlier about how we're built for community. I'm listening to a book right now called The Whole Brain Child, just understanding what's going on in my child's brain and development stages and when they're throwing fits like they were doing today, which is why I was like 20 minutes late. And you were talking about like the nature and nurture. You didn't say the culture. Something I thought of was the chapter I listened to on the way home said that like scientifically our brain is a communal organ, or a social organ. Like the brain itself is literally made to be social. And so like we develop in the context of the relationships around us. So our family, schools, work, like that's how children grow, and that's how you grow. You develop properly. And when you don't develop properly is when, kids are abandoned. You know, I think of, we had some friends in Denver who fostered a baby who was physically like neglected from birth and stopped crying when she was hungry in the middle of the night because she learned at 10 days old, there's no point in crying. My mom doesn't come feed me. Like bizarre, terrible stuff. And so I think of like the nature, you're spot on. And like what Stalin said, like there are good aspects of all of these masks. And like we're and that's what I was sharing earlier. We're not trying to poo poo on all of these, like, oh yeah, all this manliness stuff is dumb. Like everyone be super passive and zen and quiet. It's when we take it too far, right? It's, when we're on our phones all the time to where we're on social media and then we're not social with anyone at all. That's where the communal, the social organ of our brain, and I don't think it's any surprise that we're having a lot of mental health crises in our society as we become less and less connected, which is one of the goals of this podcast, is to be connected. And then I'll just share one example because I just want to share this story in general because it was a very unique life experience, and it ties into balancing the need to have a mask and not wear a mask. So last Saturday, we experienced, my family and I, our first being at a public event where there was a shooting. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't a mass shooting, but we were at the state fair and these guys got in a fight and one guy pulled out a gun and shot the other person. You didn't know that at the time. There's thousands of people there. And it was a very surreal experience. We're standing in line waiting to go on our last, of course it's our last ride, like one more ride for the kid. And all of a sudden you hear screaming, you look over and it's like literal mass of humanity is running, like just running in every direction. And it is pretty terrifying. And it was not as terrifying, thankfully, because I had kind of mentally prepared and talked with Brooke. Like, thankfully, the last two jobs I've worked at, we actually have HR has put on active shooter training. So I actually felt quite educated, and that kind of like kicked in the moment when just masses of humanity were just running, hopping fences, things like that. And I had to put on a Stoic mask, right? Like it was not time to like freak out, and because then my son would have freaked out as well, right? So it was a time to put on a stoic mask and be composed, be calm, and work together as a family to get out of there safely and get home as quick as possible. And thankfully, obviously we did, because I'm on this call. But then we get the kids to bed and it's time to take off the stoic mask, because it's just my wife and me, and she's processing how scary it was. And that would not have been helpful to her feeling loved. And it would have been helpful for me if I was just like, yep, I'm good. I wasn't scared. Like, it is what it is. It's like, no, it was like, man, we prepared for, like, we often say it's nowadays, sadly, it's not if, it's when we're at a mass shooting or a public shooting. And it was like, wow, it was September 23rd. That it was our win. But being able to take off that mask, like, now it's time to be vulnerable. I think that was, wise to take it off then and be able to talk vulnerably with my wife and how we were both doing.
Great example. That's great example.
Well,
yeah, that's a perfect story.
I think that kind of answers some of the things you're talking about, Thomas, on like the macro level, the nature and nurture, and then kind of a tangible thing that I was thinking of, where it's like, no, there are really positive things to probably each of these masks, like what Stalen was saying. But like we've all talked about, it's when it can go too far, where we don't go on a hike with our friends because we want to maximize our workout potential. Or this morning was a real struggle. I've really gotten back into a routine of, I want to work out every day. And my son was screaming, biting. It was terrible. And I was like, you know what? I have to prioritize being a father over making this workout. And I missed my workout, but I spent the extra 30 minutes working with him. And that was really hard. So I'm not just pointing the finger. It's me too.
Yeah. Just I was just going to say one last thing. It was just the last part about how awesome you are when you take off the mask, Mm-hmm. You have emotional freedom. You have this weight off your shoulders. Like, you can actually talk about what like you just need to talk about.
Yeah.
You invite others to as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
for sure.
You know what, Flez? That's going to be the challenge to our audience. That is a perfect way to wrap up this episode, is if you feel like you got a weight on your shoulders because, you're not being fully known or fully vulnerable because you have some fears based on faulty beliefs. Our tagline with this is read, reflect, and connect. So reflect on those things that might be weighing you down. Connect with an old friend, maybe a current friend, and step out in faith a little bit. Be vulnerable. Talk about what's on your mind. And I think you'll be surprised. Most people respond positively, right? I would say more often than not. So we've all had bad experiences, but I think it's easier to remember the bad experiences than the good ones. And it's a testament to this friend group right here. I feel like we're all pretty open with each other, especially off the mic. And we still have a great deal of care and affection for each other, and walking through some of the darkest valleys that we've all gone through.
That wraps up our episode for the Books Brothers podcast. Next week, we will review and discuss the second mask, the athlete mask, pages 41 to 60. If you haven't yet, buy or borrow the Mask of Masculinity, how men can embrace vulnerability, create strong relationships, and live their fullest lives by Lewis Howes, and read along with us. Thanks for joining us. If you haven't yet, buy or borrow the book we're going through and follow along with us. Please subscribe and give us a review. We would really appreciate it. Also, please consider sharing this podcast with a friend or a family member who you'd think would get something out of it. Finally, we'd love to hear from you. If you are challenged by our conversation or have any questions or feedback, email us at connect@booksbrotherspodcast.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week. Until then, read, reflect, and connect.